First of all, I'd like to thank the Italcementi group because I will be saying things which are not political correct. I'm an architect of metal and not cement. So when I'm asked to speak in an organization that produces cement, I say I am not the right person. But I'm surprised because I enjoy when I build things. I like to have to deal with intelligent people, intelligent entrepreneurs and manufacturers. And here we have something to do with the intelligence of someone who wants to develop new products, someone that wants to have in-depth research. So when we speak of self-cleaning, anti-smog and transparent cement, when one wonders how can we work with the environment and for the environment, or when we in general ponder about cement, of course this means that this research is ongoing and the attempt is to go beyond and experiment above all. And this is not the only aspect in a company such as this. I'm really very happy to be here with you today because this is an intelligence that I would like to use and apply it. I like building, I like constructing, I like to find how materials can be used in a new way. Each artifact stimulates me. The theme of this presentation is horizons. Now, horizons are more or less the same thing. Why do I suggest this image? This is a horizon line. Well, first of all, because I come from Brittany, I'm used to the seaside, and when you live along the seashore, you have the horizon. And when you are a seafarer, the horizon line is like an aim. You set out to reach it, but at the same time, you have to negotiate with the sun, the sea, the winds, to reach that horizon. But once you've reached a certain point, you realize that the horizon is still further ahead. So it's a question of going further and further away in the distance. Now, architecture is the same. My projects are exactly the same. I start upon an adventure. There is a point every time I set out for a project to which I aim, and I have to negotiate it with the clients, with the regulations, regulatory plans and what have you. But once I reach the accomplishment of a project, I want to start for a new adventure, a new horizon. This is the metaphor for me in my architectural activity. So as I was saying, I come from Brittany, and we have pirates, not pirates, we have coursers in Saint-Malo. These are nice people who were always ready with the king to negotiate seafaring accomplishments and in an attempt to beat the British. Once I was called a corsair. I like taking off in this way, setting out on these voyages. I like the challenge, even when it comes to challenging the British, and this is particularly important for a French person. Now, I don't know if you see this project. This stems from a draft, what you see on the left, a draft that I use to explain dynamic equilibrium to my team. Often, in speaking of equilibrium, we speak of a plank resting on two props, but I'm interested in dynamic equilibrium and not static equilibrium. So we need to rebalance the forces on the one and the other side. We need to find this balancing point that has to be calculated very precisely, something very rigorous, but it is at the same time that once you've reached the point of balance or equilibrium, it may become unstable. This is interesting because you have to constantly make up for the imbalance. So this draft wants to This sketch wants to show exactly how this works. So in a contemporary art um gallery, we organize this structure, and 6 meters away, this is a 6 meter plank, there is an aluminum ball filled with sand to work out the equilibrium point. We worked out where the 6 meter plank was to be positioned on another bar, uh, 6 centimeter diameter, but we had to calculate this equilibrium point, and with just a grain of sand we managed the balance, and this ball filled with sand is such that when the viewer moves, air creates a current and everything moves. This is a dynamic equilibrium. When no one is present, the equilibrium is static, but as soon as somebody enters, the air moves, it moves, and the equilibrium becomes dynamic. And this with no supporting fulcrum. And this is what I'm interested in architecture. In other words, how to conquer horizon, but also how to work on the balance, which is always on the limit of stability and instability. I will mention Rome, but you've seen the pictures. Why the macro project in Rome, which I won an award for in 2000? You know that a competition, international competition, isn't easy. It requires much energy and so on. At the time I was involved in this, I didn't have much work at the time, and I said, why not? Designing a museum, especially contemporary art, is always a wonderful challenge. In Rome in 2000, even more stimulating, because Rome didn't have the image of a city focused on contemporary art. So I said, why not? It's a challenge. And then I pondered on the city of Rome. This city of roofs, as I propose it here, seen from above, not on the same plane, not flat, but non-continuous, chaotic, almost baroque, changing. Even the lighting in cities, in the streets change. It's not just a constant flow of light as in Paris. It is a city which is simultaneously mineral in its nature as well. You see, and you realize that behind the facades in the gardens, there is a lush vegetation, because the climate is such where plants grow well. You don't see that many from below the city, but when you go above the rooftops, you see these gardens on the roofs. People live on the roofs of Rome. This led me to the macro. It wasn't called macro at the time, it was the Contemporary Art Gallery, and then it became the Macro Contemporary Art Museum, and it's outside the walls, not far from Villa Borghese and from the Termini station. And it is in the 1900s urban fabric, very close to the Peroni brewery. So it is positioned in that neighborhood, ordinary buildings, but I was asked to maintain the facades on the road, because you know how rigorous and how obviously there are constraints because of the urban planning regulatory system. I didn't want to work on keeping the facade and working inside, but I thought, well, because I'm in Rome and because of the history in Rome and because of all the architects that have worked in Rome and so on, I have to respect, of course, all these constraints, and I have to maintain a low profile and maintain the facade. You can't change the facade. That's it. I can interrupt it to propose a new entrance to the museum on the other side, but the facade has to be maintained. This was therefore a personal challenge, having these constraints, and this is the condition in which I had to intervene. This structure had to be maintained. Architecturally, it had no interest, but I had to keep it, and we put something else inside. They had refurbished part of the buildings that existed. They had painted them in yellow because it seems that is the color for Rome right now. I don't know where they got this idea. So the internal part was used these suspended windows. So the idea was to work on the plastics. You can make compositions on the plasters with plasters to see how the movement and the space works, and then so you go one section at a time, the various uh, models that are the elements that we work with to make the proportions and work on the volumes. And then slowly and gradually we concluded with this plastic model in the first part of the competition, because we believe that Rome, a warm city, a Mediterranean city where it is beautiful to live, we have to fill or close all this space with a roof. This roof is like a glacier. It's on different levels, and it is not a flat terrace, but at the same time, remembering this city, Rome, where everyone lives from above. You see, Rome is a city of squares for me. You move from one square to another, typical of all Italian city centers, but Rome more than others. There was no beautiful piazza in this square. So this suspended terrazza could become the square of the neighborhood. The difference in level between the entrance between the old entrance and the new one, 4.5 meters difference in level. We had to therefore go there and find this volume of 12.5 meters behind, which was what was needed for the public area of the museum. And so from the courtyard, we introduced a system of access to the terrace through ramps. So we were working on two surfaces, considering the museum as two surfaces, one on top of the other. The public space, the foyer inside, and the external as the public square or terrace. And these both would have been a continuation of the urban space. We prolonged the road to the foyer to bring the city into the museum and vice versa, with no break in the continuity. And then these paths, these itineraries meant we could use the whole terrace, and then stairs here on the back leads downstairs to the street level. The people walking the road before were able to go from one side to the other along this path without necessarily entering the museum, going into the museum and square public space. So the inhabitants and the citizens of Rome could use the museum as a public square, a public space where it was possible to meet in order to enjoy the space. This square was to be close to a restaurant, a fountain, as in all the squares in Rome. So the square would provide everything which is available in Rome: the restaurant, the fountain, but at the same time it was a way to discover through the huge windows, bay windows, the museum, and see some interior indoor exhibition spaces. So you just go there to drink a cup of coffee or to have lunch, and you get a peek into the museum. Now, this is the story I wanted to tell in Rome through the museum. Contemporary art is not easy for the general public because contemporary art raises more issues than answers. So in my case, I wanted to make it easier for the museum to be accessible to the general public. So this is why I use these itineraries, passeggiate, and pathways, these discovery pathways, in order to come across contemporary art, even by hazard. I mentioned the Terrazza, the old building. This is the exhibition hall, 8,000 square meters on the corner of the building. And per se, this is a white space because when you want to build a contemporary art museum, this and we're in a Richard Meyer beautiful building. It was Richard Meyer who introduced this idea, this ideology of Museum of Contemporary Art as a neutral box. I remember a conversation between Daniel Burre and Frank Gehry when he started, and the question was, is a contemporary art museum, must it be necessarily a box, a white box? He said, not necessarily, because space must resist even when art is inserted in it, but it shouldn't be too strong. Otherwise, the space eats up the art. So you have to find and strike the right balance between the building and the resistance of space and the freedom of the artist and the artists. This is why I put this hall in the corner in order to have white walls, but the wall separating this from the foyer is not straight, it's irregular. And at the same time, there's a passage mid-height so that there is a passage within. So this is a space which resists as a consequence. And then I painted everything else in black, all the walls where the artworks are not exhibited. In black. Why black? Because black, and I say it in a Richard Meyer building, it is the opposite. White is considered a neutral color. I believe that black is also another neutral color. First of all, it resists more. It's a neutral color, and artists have to be strong. It's not easy to work on black. So exhibition areas are not in black, but the public areas are in black. Or the black can host some works of art that can manage the black. So this, as you can see, was partitioned with the cafe looking out onto the street, and you go below to physically enter the museum space. Simple. This glass window that enables you to go into the courtyard. The cafe can open up towards the garden because it can be open to sunlight, especially when it's a nice day. These passages provide the opportunity to walk around the spaces, the conference hall, which becomes an exhibition hall, and below the fountain, which is on the upper level. And the fountain, because everything is glass, you can see the water from above and from below. Then the conference room is a monolith. When I mentioned dynamic equilibrium and imbalances earlier, we worked on all the facets in order to make it a monolith. We excavated underground in order to have it appear separate in the center, in order to put it in a sort of precarious balance. You have to go from the ramp inside. Outside it's all red. That's the pulsating section of the museum, opaque red. And inside it is red and shiny, even inside. This is the center, the heart, and it reflects in all directions. So this means that you feel in a different world. You went from Rome to the museum, and then from the museum to the heart of the museum. Another space, another universe. Everything in red here. We designed everything here. The Frau armchair, the chairs, the tables. When you are in this auditorium, if you want to take notes and there's no light, you can't take notes. There's no table, there's no way to take notes. And I thought about this. If you're in the dark, you need enough light to see, to work, to do anything, basically. So this is an exhibition hall, very simple, with a black ceiling. And considering that the ceiling is the roof, and it covers the whole area, supported only by 5 pillars inside the space, I didn't want any structure to appear evident. Everything was to disappear. But therefore we had to have these supporting beams that you can see. You can't see, for instance, all the air conditioning and heating facilities. Everything disappears. You don't see anything above. And this is easy to do with the black. You see, it becomes invisible. You can walk along the planks and passages to see the works of art from different perspectives. These are the toilets. Toilets are always fun to design because they are spaces of freedom. In this case, they are a container attached to the old structure. With reference to Playtime Objector T, a 1967 film, he wanted to demonstrate the ultra-modern world of the 60s, total modernness, the glamour of those years. And he thought of a city made up of smooth, shining surface, nothing rugged, everything almost immaterial, where nothing is touched. In one of the early sequences of the film, Jacques Tati enters an office in a building such as this. He goes into a waiting room, and everything there is lined with metal materials. And because he has some slippery shoes, they make a noise. And I thought, this has to be the noise that I want to hear in these toilets. So stainless steel is used, reflections, no limits, and in the center of the space you have a white object. And inside, when you wash your hands, you go into this space and the hands dance above the volume. And when they move, and then you intersect a sensor, and the water comes out with the red ray. We didn't want it to be cold. I wanted the warm. I didn't want the cold modernity, but rather this is the contrast. You go from the cold to the warm, the alive. This is water and life that comes out. The water comes out, and just because you move your hands. And when the hands move here, there is an infrared system which dries the hands with the warm air flowing. This is like a dance of the hands. This is the library, and sorry, this is the bookshop, and we designed everything, even the handles of the doors, and then the terrace. This terrace is not a flat terrace. It's with different levels, sometimes smooth, sometimes more rugged, so that you can feel different fabrics under your feet. When you walk, you're not always in the same place. You're like moving around and you feel the difference. So under your feet, you feel the changing space, the environment changes. We then repainted the yellow buildings in grey. They allowed us to do this before the inauguration. And in the evenings, all the window sections become lit. It's like being around a fountain with heat and light inside that becomes reddish. And it changes the perceptions of space. We then designed the lights like spears that are very effective as an idea. And we designed the lighting in the restaurants as well, the cafe, chairs and doors that goes into, or looks out into the piazza. So the second level is at the same level of, no, the first level is at the cafe level, and the second level look out into the piazza. They didn't know that they lived in the piazza, and now they have a piazza facing their apartment. And here we have the Opera Garnier restaurant. Somebody called me in Paris and asked me if I wanted to design this. They said, yes, we want to. We've won the competition for this restaurant. We had a project with a designer, and now we'd like an architect. Are you interested? I said, yes, why not? I'm interested, yes. But I didn't realize at the time that not only was the building as a monument protected by the Beaux Arts, but all the facades that look out onto the square are designed by Garnier, so this internal space is protected, and there are urban constraints. When I started studying in the 70s, the 1900s were just the history before the Second World War, and so you didn't study much of the 20th century. Now, the Opera Garnier, which was an iconoclast work, has now become historical. Everyone looks at this monument as an icon because it's remained the same. Nobody has done anything to make it more contemporary. This I discovered afterwards. So I was asked to design the restaurant within this round area, which looks out towards the eastern facade of the opera. This is a place where usually personnel and staff could have access to bring materials to the restaurant. So I was asked to make it an indoor space. And the first idea was to say, all right, because I couldn't touch the columns, I couldn't work on the dome or the stones, the idea I got was so to put an undulated glass veil behind the columns making the glass a self-supporting structure. In other words, making it stable and anchoring it well in the ground, because I could work with the ground. It was an external surface that could be restored and renewed. So this is how I approached it, and I also wanted to add a plane on the volume. This was sacrilege because this was a dome. How can you intervene on a dome? So I continued to propose something that was wavy. I never touched the columns, creating a volume effect without working on the legacy, always working outside on the stones, which were just to be made more lively and not manipulated. I presented it to the art authorities, the urban planning authorities, and we negotiated. What did I negotiate? I negotiated a lawn here. I want to take this mezzanine to the facades so that I could free the central part here. This line was the result of a negotiation, therefore, with the authorities, the planning authorities, so that I could define this mezzanine level and create different spaces here, working on different spaces. And you can choose, for instance, where to dine: downstairs overlooking the street, or upstairs more protected. This mezzanine level was to be a little like a pod, more closed, close to the dome, so that you could feel a little, you can feel that you're in a cozy nest, if you like. And this is the entrance. The entrances had these metal frames. This was a flat section that had to be supported, so we anchored it in the joints, but not on the stones. We also used these window pieces, and we connected them with a steel plate, and it takes them up to the other higher level, and this becomes a metal structure. So in order to avoid a single pillar in the dome, and then there was a shell of plaster that was worked in order to make it a little more rugged, because we also wanted it to absorb sound. You see here the glass above is 3 centimeters away from the stones, and the joints are all in silicone. And this is the surface. Sometimes it is concave in order to provide the sound effect. And I didn't want any lighting that was visible in this space in order to respect this historical monument. So the lighting was worked here within these pockets in the pillars that support the mezzanine level, thanks to the reflecting potential of the white surface. Here we worked up in the upper section where we put some lighting that illuminate the whole dome area. And then below, behind, we have all these columns, a lounge with moving sofas and couches facing the opera, and the doors here to the right lead to the opera, and you can go in and out from there. And above, everything in red: the floor, the armchairs, the chairs, the tables, because this pod is under the vault of the opera. Luckily now they've removed the um, tabletops. We've designed the table mats. Now this is another project, another Museum of Contemporary Art in Brittany. Here again, other, well, urban planning that was constraining. I had to respect this structure. This is an abstract French artist, Henri Mamou, who passed away 5 years ago. And here we have the only three-dimension work of art that she created. This is the number 9, constantly declined. These are granite monoliths, the size of about 72 centimeters by 80 in the section, positioned at an angle on the lawn with an angle inclination calculated on based on 9. She didn't want her work of art to be illuminated by the rear facade of this building. So because I had to bring in a monolith, I was limited. The idea was to fill this volume, so I had to take advantage of the indoor space. So I cut it with this oblique hole, horizontal but vertical as well. This is a cut all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom, 30 meters hole, if you like. And then this is in black. It doesn't portray light on the sculpture. And in this facade there is this section. It's covered here. There is a roof, 50 meters in length. This is black stainless steel which reflects, and then black glass, almost transparent, so that throughout the day this volume is a silent monolith. But then when the space indoor gets lit, the space irradiates without illuminating or projecting light onto the sculpture. This is not yet opened, inaugurated. It will open in July. And then we had the roof and this section, a little at the back. The cement is not black. It's not totally black. It's difficult to have cement totally black. And so depending on the light and the weather, the metal wall changes. Sometimes it's metal, sometimes it's an opaque black. The color and the shade changes with the changing weather. It vibrates because it's quite windy in Brittany, so you enter from one side. This is a picture which has been rendered, and you see you can't access because you go into the auditorium and this blocks the passage. So you're attracted by the light of the center without having access, so you have to go around the auditorium, go up these stairs and go into this space, 1.50 meter corridor, and then it opens up into the outside, and then on the other side you are in that hole, this vertical opening which can be accessed through the stairs, and then you see the hall overlooking the foyer, but it doesn't touch the conference hall. This was the art a year ago. This is the situation now. The surfaces are now being finished. Here we have the exhibition room in black, which projects towards the inside, and sometimes it reflects depending on the natural lighting, the sun, the concrete here. I can't show you the finished work because it's not yet been finished, but let me tell you, this space is more dense, more compact than the Rome space, but at the same time, this verticality of the whole is impressive. When you look at from above, especially, there's a 30 meter gape, and it looks westward. So in the afternoon, you see the sun setting. Although the black filters the light, the sun sets and enters this space when you know that you're totally closed from the outside. We're also building another building in Lyon. Lyon has two major rivers, Saône, the Rhône, and then there's this peninsula, the old harbor, and there are industrial artifacts, rotating bridges and so on. And all the buildings along the river, on the banks of the river, are being refurbished, and I'm building here on the other side where the two rivers meet. So this embankment will become a walkway with restaurants and businesses, and then you have to cross the bridge, a low bridge. Space is open, we're on the river, but then suddenly there's a lower level. So my project and Dan's working on a rectangular space to build a three-dimensional space, a cube-like building. And the embankment is covered by this building. It's a 4-story. 25 minutes is the height difference. And because this building had this shape, we had to spin the atrium, if you like. And so when you enter here, you have a low window view, and you go into the main hall of the building. This was a competition, so I had to choose an artist, and I chose Philippe Cevarini, who comes from Tessin but lives in Paris, and he works on perspective. I said to him, I give you the facades, but change them into something articulate and complex. The first answer he gave me is, you can't tell an artist what to do. I'll do what I like. And I said, yes, but it's my facade. So he proposed something which was imposing on the landscape, and architecture has to erase the previous landscape. So he wanted to give the original landscape after I had intervened. So he took pictures in 4 directions from the building and then apply the previous landscape on the building which existed before my contribution. This is the picture today, which was taken so that it can be applied to my facade, and inside there is this glass, the 2 rivers, and we have the 4 facades which provide different looks onto the landscape. We needed 2 pillars in the main hall to support this with a metal structure that goes all round and then propped up by the central pillar, and then suspend all the floors inside. Today, this is the stage. This is a month ago. We now have this structure, as you can see. with internal pillars. There's going to be more than one lift, and these tubes here are the structures that will support the floors, 50 meters in height. It's impressive. And this, just to mention how this metal structure is powerful. This is a beam in the center of the building. It'll be finished at the beginning of next year, we believe. We also drew and designed the lighting for offices. Everything has to be, of course, sustainable. So we can't remove the lowering areas of the ceilings because that's where all the cabling goes. So I mixed a bit of this and a bit of that. We worked with the lighting engineers so that the lighting could be suspended. So it's something that's going to break sound but at the same time provide lighting. So we worked on these metal petals which are then suspended above the offices and they float. They both absorb sound and provide lighting. I was also asked to work on the river facing the structure in Lyon and dealing with the restaurants. Here I chose some round, like egg-like structures on the water. This will be the entrance, then the toilets, the kitchen, the restaurant, the cafe, the lounge, the terrace, and restaurant and cafe. This is inside the restaurant. The client therefore can wait. The client is waiting for everything to be finished. And in 2007, I won a competition for the harbour in Tangiers. The king had decided to build a harbour 20 kilometers away from the center of Tangiers. So this was a container port, this is a container port, but the king wanted a passenger terminal for the ferries. So we won the competition for this project, but we realized that we had to reorganize the harbor. This place is amazing. It's close to the mountains that come down to the sea there, and it's a very seismic area. There's a mountain that falls into the sea almost. So we had to cut sections into the mountain for a road, a motorway, and then there's a place for ticket monitoring. Then there is a railway terminal with a railway station, and then this platform with all the areas that were removed. This was the site for the terminal for the ferry service, and the passenger terminal is here near the main platform of the port, and the waiting room has to be brought closer to the sea. Sometimes the sea is rough, so often the ships can't leave, so the waiting room has to be pleasant. You're ready to leave, but you might have to wait. And of course you always have your luggage. It's not like in an airport where you've checked in your luggage. In the port you have your luggage with you, so it's complex. you have to go upstairs, downstairs. We wanted a comfortable situation. So starting from the terminal, we went down a level below with these horizontal passages into the waiting room and other passages that lead to the satellites of the ferry terminal. And then, in order to board the ship, avoiding too many ramps that go from one level to another. You can't carry your luggage for too long and too far. And then this area here, which projects, if you like, into the sea. And then these parking areas are constantly changing. It's difficult to create green areas. And also, because it's hot, we needed shade. You might have to wait hours for the ferries to leave. Even if you're in a car. So by raising the satellite areas and the terminal, there could be an area for shade while you're waiting to board the ferry. This is inside the terminal and the waiting room with these passages that go through this area. This project has been suspended because of financing. And now let me move on to China. At the beginning of the year, we won a competition in Nanjing for a museum. This is an hour away from Nanking. And there are some caves in the mountain. Archaeologists found one of the oldest skeletons in the world. This is a place where there's many caves, and there are miraculous stones as well. From a cave that collapsed, they found stones which is considered to be sacred. There are multicolored stones, and so they created to develop a museum to tell the history of man on Earth, and the evolution. At the same time, it's a geological museum. They launched an international competition. We won it at the beginning of the year, so we suggested working on different levels on the mountain so that the museum becomes a section inserted into the mountain. The perspectives here are not very clear from the picture, but they had to be isometric curves into which bring the museum volumes. The surfaces are not overlapping one on top of the other, and with the escalators you change level and the space changes, directions and surfaces are different, constantly changing. This approach, no, this will be twice the surface of Rome. In Shanghai, we built a small pavilion. Then I said I was willing to attend a jury, and they said, but why don't you give us a project or a design for a pavilion? I said, but what kind? Well, they sent me an email and showed me a section, and they said, this is where you need to build a pavilion. I said, what's the surface? 1,500 square meters. We worked in all directions, and 15 days later, I submitted the design, And they said, fine. We worked by email, really, and we exchanged email, my studio and China. And then I received the pictures, and the pictures were exactly what I had designed. I went 4 times. I visited Beijing at the time. We worked with this strategy. I made the design using the following strategy. I remember Peter Rice. I had worked with Peter Rice in the end of the 90s. He told me the story of Renzo Piano when he won the Osaka airport competition. When he won the project, the Japanese called him over. They gave him a check. You can come back for the inauguration. No, but I want to work on this. And don't you want us to discuss? They said, yes, we can meet. You can explain how to do the facade. They wanted to work with glasses, with rivets and so on. He said, leave me the facade and the roof, and you do the rest. And Peter Rice once told me, when you work in these situations, these tenders and competitions, the project is so complex that those who order it don't know how to do it. So let them do it, and you see they'll do it. I had to deal with this project from the very beginning, and it was finished exactly as I wanted it. Then we have these laser gadget things that I didn't like, but the rest is exactly what I had designed. In Paris, we're now working on a building which is an old hangar, a huge warehouse built in the 60s. For the Paris Ring Road. Now, the municipality of Paris wants to change this neighborhood, and in the old site, they want to build a commercial precinct with car parks. So they chose 15 architects. All these architects, almost 15, each architect has its own lot, and they work for the residential area, then the offices. This is going to be an area that is going to become a business innovation center. And then they have an area here for a sports arena. So many architects for this single building. We're working downstairs. This building is very simple, as you can see. I wanted to use some bubble-like shapes on the facade. I wanted to I proposed a white facade on the south and black on the north. And then we have the east section, which has a black going into white. It wasn't so much the color that was the problem, but rather these bubbles, these round shapes. I said that the windows could be round. I had to discuss this for a year. And the master plan was done by Coulas. He decided that this was crystal mineral in layers. The volumes were imposed. And it's not so much mineral, but cement is now interesting for me, you see. I like to play on this. It's like saying, I'm going to give you a light facade, but it will be in cement. Of course, metal structures were needed, especially because of the 6 levels. So things had to be light because of the higher levels. So this is the design, and we're going to be building next year. In Paris, we were asked to make a proposal on water. I'm becoming a water architect. I have worked in harbors, so I'm going to go back to the sea. In this case, it's the Seine, close to the Grand Palais, Les Invalides. This was a small competition for the company that manages the rivers. They wanted to build their offices here. We won the competition. 2 different volumes were planned, one for offices and one for events. 600 square meters for one and 600 square meters for the other. I thought of 2 floating mass volumes. I didn't want something symmetric though, because I don't like symmetry. I like the non-symmetry, the instability rather than symmetry. So I looked towards science. So an opposition of 2 masses that are the same but that work differently. So I found this little design that scientists describe as the universe which is entering the black hole. I thought this was interesting. I thought, wow, this is interesting. So I described a surface within the volume, an atrium, and then the offices, as if it were a ribbon that then goes down apparently into another floating object to describe the outside of the space. And then produce an enigmatic object, something like a submarine. And I thought of another object below the water for the water level for a more protective area. They asked, therefore, later they asked us to change the office area into a restaurant. We don't know whether it's going to go ahead. Somebody will ask for a room here at the foot of the Grand Palais, and this is not a bad idea, after all. Here we have another floating object, another competition here in my birth town. This is a floating tourism company. The mayor called me and I said, yes, I will attend, but this is a nice project. I won it because this city has a tradition of floating structures, wooden floating structures on the water where they used to wash clothing, but then with modern times things changed. But these barges, boats, some still remain. So I worked on these floating vessels, typical of the area. So I covered them with a membrane, translucent effect. So the light is absorbed during the day and then it is reflected at night. So it's like a lantern inside the city with different facets. You see here this vessel. I'm sorry, I missed the indoors. Let me show you this sailing boat. I received a very lucky phone call once, the Opera Garnier, and another time a young man called me and he asked me if I wanted to design a sailing boat, a modern sailing boat, unique. I said, yes, why not? I'm from Brittany, I know about sailing, so yes, I was excited about the idea. I met this Italian client in Rome. We went out for lunch, and during the lunch, he was very, very young. He was 24 years old at the time. I met him. I mentioned the age because I was talking with him. We talked about sculpture, cooking, and music, and taste and interests. I was surprised because he was very sophisticated for a 24-year-old, and at one point he said, I would like to find the right architect that works for a unique boat. If we were to design the boat together, he asked me, what color would you make it? And what he did was, I said black, and he brought out a model, um, a 44-meter sailing boat to build. I thought I was dreaming. After lunch, we decided we were going to work together. The first thing I did was to go to the shipyard to see how we could do this project. So I visited the shipyard every 3 months for a long period of time. We were working on different sections, of course, to develop the various spaces because everything is different within a sailing boat. Every centimeter is different from another. I wanted this boat to enable free movement within the boat. This is a very large boat, and I don't like large boats where you go into small areas where you can't move. I wanted to work within free space. He didn't want to charter it. He wanted to use it with his family, his friends. So he said to me he wanted this boat that had to be something mobile. So I imagined it as a loft where all the walls could be changed and where it could be restructured constantly. Now this was a challenge. The shipbuilders asked me, "Are you sure you want to do it this way?" I said, "Yes." So we started working on the structures. This was a traditional shipyard with these. They use supporting walls. I needed something different, so I brought along books on sailing boats. I have many of these books at home. For the America's Cup, I had all the bibliography. Often you work with rings, structural rings, as in aircraft. And I said to them, how many partitions? I wanted to eliminate the partitions. They eliminated only 2, but that was enough to get the result I want. Everything is open. It's an open space. It's just like a loft. One of the things we discussed was the deck, the upper deck. I wanted a flush deck, I said. I wanted a flat deck with no obstacles. It has to be a free boat where you can dance. I said, fine, but the shipyards, they said, no, you've got the winches, you've got the support, you've got all these technical things, you've got all these things that you can't have. No, I said, I want it flat and free. So we had to work with the shipbuilding yard to design a deck that was as smooth as possible. All the planks had to be used and suppress also the windows, and they had to be moved to the sides so that they could be inserted along the deck plane with side glass sections that would bring in the light, and in the evening you can use them for lighting as well. That's how it looks at night. So there's a lighted environment with a very pleasant atmosphere. This is a boat on which you can sail totally freely, comfortably with these surfaces. On the winches, you can lie down. Very nice. This is the red surface inside, totally open, with no partitions. This is the engine room. This is the owner's cabin. And then we have the room, the bathroom. Everything is open. And inside these spaces, there are doors that separate the bathroom from the dinette. The dinette is open if you have a person that you want to host here. There's a sliding panel so that you have an extra cabin for the guest, but otherwise you're totally free. And only the bathrooms are closed, of course. And this is the kitchen, total open space that looks out into the central area. And these are the sliding doors. And then there's a library here. And in the center, we have the kitchen with a bar section. The window door slides, and these steps are carbon fiber and suspended and lead you to the deck upstairs. And this is the main cabin. We have the bed. We designed the bed as well. And this is an inox reflecting panel. This is the shower. This is the bathroom that becomes a shower. And with holes in the floor. But if you want to take a bath, you close the floor and everything becomes a bathtub. So the bathroom can become a bathtub, small space, but every function occupies all the space. So everything has to be organized so that all the space available can be used, but at the same time, everything disappears when you don't want to take a bath and want to take a shower. It doesn't seem technical. It's clean, linear. We also designed the wash basins. For instance, the dryer where you can dry clothes and so on. In 2004, I attended another competition in Beijing. 10 architects attended, and this was for a block tower that was being built. Every architect had to work on one floor and work on the floor. I wanted to open a space. I wanted open space. That's what I like, so that I can move freely. I'm working on this diagonal and suppressing partitions, maintaining only the structural supporting walls. We opened everything up, and you see this is the transition from the kitchen to the dining room. Everything is open besides this. And then a big table that provides continuity among the spaces. The living room, the kitchen, continuity between all the rooms. These are active walls which are transparent, translucid. This is interesting depending on what you want to do in the apartment. You can have intimacy or public air, well, open areas. And then you see this translucid wall when you want intimacy, but then it becomes look through when you don't want privacy. We were free to do whatever we liked. In 2000, I won a competition to design a UNESCO a telephone cabin for UNESCO. I won the competition for the telephone cabin. I changed the support. It was an orange ball, Pierluigi Nervi building, a concrete building, which is really extraordinary. Anyway, it was the first time that I entered the building. I'd been living in Paris for 30 years, but when I entered this concrete building, I was amazed to see how concrete had been worked voluptuously. At the entrance, there were, I don't know the word, there were horizontal planes in concrete, 15 square meters in surface with small pillars. And in the conference hall, there were columns which ended with a rectangular shape. Or vice versa, triangular turning into round. So in the conference room, it was like entering a pleated concrete structure. And when I entered this place, I said, why did I wait so long to visit this wonderful place? And then I won the competition because of the telephone cabin. I visited often. Architects used to work together. We all worked together, artists and architects. And architects would ask the artists to put their works in. So that was a time when they worked together with architects. So there's a Le Corbusier, a Picasso. So after I won this small competition, I was asked to design the furniture. One first thing I needed to design was the reception area. So I did this twisted, pleated structure. I worked with an approach which was like that of a shipbuilding yard with plastic and resins. I produced a huge structure, 11 meters, and this became a monolith. In the conference hall reception, and the orange color I chose was as an homage to the Picasso fresco. And then I was asked to choose some armchairs. So I recalled the 60s. Paulin was a French designer. He had thought of an armchair called the snake, a sinuous form, shape, installed in many waiting rooms in museums. Designing chairs for an architect is fearsome. I find it difficult to find the proportions. How can I design an armchair? It might be nice, but not comfortable. So I went to look for all the armchairs that I liked because comfortable for inspiration. And so I referred to the Pierre Paulin snake, and I said, yes, but I want this snake to become an armchair. So I started with a simple armchair, a back, a sitting section. Then I moved the back support and changed it to make it look like a snake. And then all the sides of these armchairs are the same. They can be put one next to the other and create something sinuous inside the space. The color of the leather is purple. I made reference to this Le Corbusier tapestry on the wall. And then I designed a big table made in resin with four thin legs. But then there was a waste paper basket that was needed, aluminium that was bent in order to create the pleat design of the concrete in the room. And then some time later, another art gallery asked me to design a structure for filing documents. And as you can see, it's red inside. We also participated in the Garden Festival. In 2009, the theme was color. Somebody in the agency said to me, "Did you see this announcement? We have to propose a black garden." I said, "Yes, okay. We've already tried, but how can you design a black garden? We don't have black plants. Let's start with an installation. Transform the garden into an installation. 25 black glass sheets, 2.5 by 1.4 meters to define the space, and then thick tire soles for the bottom, and then a dark hole. I'm fascinated by black holes. Something that hides what's on the other side. Stefano Kin said, "There's red beyond." So I was very happy. And here we positioned a plastic vat and water and a canvas. But when you enter, everyone keeps quiet because everything is silent. Chromatically noisy, but there's this very silent black hole, which I think is very pleasant. 2 years ago, this cultural space, Louis Vuitton proposed an installation on their terrace. I went to their terrace and I saw this overlooking the roofs of Paris. I wanted to fly over Paris, so I suggested like a trampoline, from which to leap. This is a ramp that narrows towards the void, and then a three-dimension film was applied which changes the reading of the surface. It's translucid if you see it from the long side, but if you see it perpendicularly, it becomes transparent. So it changes as you change your perspective. This is a contemporary art gallery, the one I designed the bubbles for. They wanted in the gallery a dog kennel. I didn't like the one they had, so we took the size of the dog and we built this black aluminium object. The mattress was sewed inside. This is for the dog of the owner of the gallery. And more recently, we've been working on a bird eating pouch. Thank you very much. I think that the themes raised by Odile's presentation have been many. We go from one approach to another, the Moroccan project to urban design projects, interior design, and interiors such as the one in the Phantom restaurant, for instance, is very interesting besides the project itself because it tells us how we can work on historical buildings without doing away with contemporary styles and approaches. And then we saw the passion for the red, the black in the museums, and then the interiors of birds. I mean, all these designs, all these projects have been approached with tension and great passion. I believe that this will stimulate many, many questions, and I'd like to thank the audience on behalf of Odile as well. And I'm sure that Odile is willing to answer your questions and remarks. If there are any questions, you can use microphones to put the question in Italian as well. It'll be translated into both French and English. Nobody wants to ask a question? Before I thank Odile, I'd like to say that outside this room there are people that can escort you to visit this laboratory, this i.lab. They are wearing a white overall, and you can meet them outside. They will take you to the site, and we will see you again tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much.